We'll start with song. And let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, peace that was meant to be. There be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be. Brothers, all are we. Let me walk with my brother in perfect harmony. Let peace begin. This be the moment. To take each moment, live each moment eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin. Peace that was meant to be with God as the Father. Brothers, all are we. Let me walk with my brother in perfect harmony. This be the moment now. Let every step I take, let this be my song to take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin. So if we stay standing, we'll just say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in the heavens, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven, so upon the earth. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen. So, please be seated. Victoria, and I'm going to use that name because it's not her real name, Victoria was involved in a ministry for children coming out of foster care, particularly girls, but the statistics for children that come through foster care and then end up in poverty or in drugs and crime and other things is extremely high. And if you think about it, it's because even though these children who are brought up in foster care can feel very loved in that environment for a time, there comes a point where the funding ends. And for a lot of these children, they're just asked to leave. The families just say, we can't support you any longer, leave. And so there's a lot of internal conflict that comes up in those children, as I say, especially girls. And Victoria is in a ministry for helping those kinds of children progress and not end up in poverty. She has a blog where she writes, and she writes beautifully. The words that she uses and the way she can articulate herself is very powerful and very moving. However, when Victoria tries to talk, it's a very different story. It's like her tongue gets tied. And she will say, at the root of that is her own struggle, her own insecurities. So she struggles to talk. And she was sharing an example of one night where she was sitting with her in-laws, as they often would do, and she thinks of them as her own parents. That's how close they are. And she would be talking, and she would talk very slowly. We all know people who are like that are very slow, they take their time. And I'm very guilty of feeling like uncomfortable for them, and you want to jump in, and that's exactly what happened. She was trying to explain something, and one of her in-laws jumped in, and she said, I often find myself being spoken over, just part of being that slow speaker and not confident. And in this case, she felt very hurt, and then she sort of shot back and said, will you let me speak now? And she stepped away from that process and realised how much harm she actually hurt her in-laws, and she hurt herself. And she reflects and realises how her insecurities do this to her. But if we go deeper, what exactly causes insecurities? We've all heard of cognitive behaviour therapy. It's been around a long time and it's progressed a lot over the years. We now have things like acceptance and commitment therapy. And there's another one here called DBT, or dialectic behaviour therapy, who Dr. Albert Ellis did a lot of work in that area. And at the root of this idea is that rational thinking. What does he call it? Rigid thinking, rigid feelings that trap us, and the ability to move forward into rational thinking and rational feelings. Quote here that the practice of a wise mind is the integration of both the reasonable mind and the emotional mind. Isn't it? Isn't that the case often? And that's the definition of flexible thinking. Thinking there meaning feeling as well. Right? A balanced mind is one that where a reasonable mind can line up and work together with your emotional mind. From Ellis's point of view, flexible thinking is a practice in giving up unhealthy needs, unhealthy shoulds, oughts, expectations of others and ourselves, and then learning to function in a rational way and feel emotionally better. Rigid thinking. It's interesting, isn't it? What I find fascinating about this is how modern psychology and postmodern psychology is catching up with a lot of what our church has been teaching for a very long time, isn't it? If you go below the insecurity here that Victoria was suffering from, what's at work? What's causing insecurity? What causes it in us when we feel it? False concepts that we have of ourselves, false concepts that we have of others, and very strong desires that are not right, selfish desires that we have, or expectations that we have that are not right, at the root of it. So I have a couple passages here before we begin talking about flexibility that help us unpack this idea. In acceptance and commitment therapy, they talk about accepting what's going on inside you. Because often when you have negative feelings and thoughts, your first result is to struggle with it. Right? Acceptance. I want you to think of that as day one work. What do you mean day one work? Go back to Genesis, right back to Genesis. And in the beginning, God created what? Yep. Day one, the very first thing he created was? Light. Light. Actually, light comes first. Yeah. You're right. When you say the earth, that's exactly right, okay? But it's this process. Day one is all about light work, isn't it? Light work. It's the light. And what does the light tend to show us? What happened when the light was, it comes next in Genesis? There was what on the earth? Darkness and
shaking.
Chaos. Feel like 99? It's chaos again, you know? This idea that the light shines inside you, and day one you go, oh gosh, there's a lot more chaos inside me than I really want to admit. I like staying over here in my little bubble where I'm just perfect and everybody else has got the problems. Isn't it? That idea, okay. So day one work is about acceptance. New light. Now I want you to think about this, because Jordan and I were talking about this on the way in. In the North Pole, Arctic, the sun never sets for over 180 days. Is that right? Over 180 days, the sun never sets. They have incredibly long days up there. But what's the weather like? Oh, it's really cold, isn't it? Day one, you have light. So what's day two work? Because that's what we're dealing with here, this flexibility, this ability to be flexible, the ability to not be rigid. You know, the worst kind of rigidity is religious rigidity. We talked about that last 2 weeks ago in the religious ego, that religious rigidity, okay? Rigid. Day two is all about flexibility, is it? Yeah, well, what happens? Can we remember what happens on day two? What happens? The separation of what, Ian? The separation of water. So we've gone from light to water now. There's separation. Now, what separates the water? Just think about natural ecosystem. What causes the water below here to separate and go up into the sky? Warmth. North Pole has a lot of light and absolutely no warmth. Day two is about letting the heat of heaven into your heart. Isn't that interesting? Say after me, Lord.
Lord,
Let your heat
let your heat
dwell in my heart.
dwell in my heart.
Oh, I'm feeling fire. God is an all-consuming fire. Burn stuff up. Okay, so day two, what happens? Remember, we talked about what happens in between the waters above and waters below? You get a firmament, and what's it called? No, it's called heaven. Who wants more heaven? Yes, please. Day two is about letting the heat of heaven do that work on you. And you become, guess what, more flexible. You can let go of the gravity of your earth and all the things that are holding you, and you can come up into that space in between. It's a beautiful space. We find that our thoughts that are so rigid, our feelings that are holding us and won't let us go of insecurity, they start to let go. Good stuff. We need more of that day two work. When I think about rigidity, the opposite of flexibility, this is what comes up in my mind. Pretty nasty looking archetype. This is one of the Bible archetypes. I love the apocalypse archetypes. They're just so graphic. You've got these little nasty little locust creatures coming out of the pit of hell that look like horses, face of men, hair of women, teeth like lion. Their wings are making so much noise. Tell me when you've got your head just chattering and it won't shut up. There's those wings of those locusts buzzing around. You know, your thoughts are just going, and they won't stop. What about when you keep reflecting on something, you ruminate? Bzzz, buzzing. Not only that, these guys carry an iron breastplate. Let me read to you what Swedenborg says about this iron breastplate. It says here, oh, by the way, who knows Frank Zappa, or who used to know Frank Zappa? Yep, the musician / comedian. Yeah. I tried to figure out who the root source of this quote was, and that was as far back as I could go. Before that, it was anonymous. So Frank Zappa was known to have said, "A mind is like a parachute. Doesn't work if it's not open." Isn't it? The truth will set you free. It'll open your mind, people. Religion full of false ideas will trap you and close you up. Any kind of falsity will block your mind. Think about that. It's very opposite to what I was taught as a young Christian. You know, I was taught the narrow path. Yes, it is a narrow path. But, you know, to them the narrow path was a closed mind. No. The truth is light and heat that opens the mind. And if you've got a parachute, you want that thing open. All right, so Revelation 9:9, and they had breastplates as if they were breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots of many horses running to battle. These words do not mean the combat of one army against another, but the combat of the spiritual, rational man and his mind against the natural man and his mind. Isn't that interesting? The natural man, who from knowledges falsely applied, is fighting against the truth and the goods. Those here who are signified by locust are such who are sensual people. They are sensual in falsities. They have no other affection than the love of self, because that affection is full of self-confidence. Not God-confidence, self-confidence. Say after me, Lord, take away my self-confidence.
Take away my self-confidence.
And replace it. With God-confidence.
With God-confidence.
Amen. That alone will fix nearly every problem. Because you'll run to the end of yourself very quickly. But when you have confidence in who God is and what He thinks of you and what He wants for you, that doesn't ever run dry. My cup runneth over. So he goes on here to say that they had breastplates of iron signifies the persuasions with which they gird themselves for combat. Ever had a conversation with someone, no matter what you say, they're right and you're wrong? No matter how you put the conversation to them, they're just not hearing you? It's a breastplate of iron. It says, they will then combat against the truths of the rational spiritual mind, and it will not prevail. So he's saying here, Swedenborg's saying here, that the truth of God's word cannot penetrate this kind of thinking. Wow. Now we know why there's a hell and there's a heaven. The light of heaven just can't penetrate that trapdoor mind, that metal closed trapdoor mind behind that. So he then goes on to say, breastplates signify persuasions because the sensual person is in falsities of evil, and they are here described as not fighting from truth or reason, but they are fighting because they cannot see the truth, but they only see falsities, and therefore in their persuasions they are fighting the truth from those falsities. That persuasiveness is so infatuating and suffocating that the spiritual rational has no avail against it. And you get some idea why some conversations are just not worth having, isn't it? You just go, well, maybe we should agree to disagree on this and just move on. Because you're not, I will give you a key that I believe when you're dealing with that kind of thinking, either in yourself or in someone else. Positive doubt, Swedenborg calls it. Positive doubt. What's positive doubt? It's questioning, in our case, positive doubt is questioning God, but in a positive way. Positive doubt. So if someone's saying to you that, well, let's go there. Let's say someone's saying to you that gender is fluid, right? And you go, well, I'm not so sure about that. Because when I look at the biological evidence of this or that, I've got my questions on what you're saying. Leave it as a question, leave it as a doubt. It gives that person a little bit more room to go away, and when the locusts get tired and they settle, up comes that doubt that you put and the thinking, and they can begin to think about what you said. So, but when you come across too rigid, up comes the armour. Even in your own mind, your own thoughts. If you're too rigid, acceptance and commitment therapy teaches, if you're too rigid, you're going to end up in a battle with that state, that ego state. So Steve Hayes says, drop the tug-of-war rope. Just drop it. Acknowledge it. Okay, my head right now is telling me how I am because I did this and I did this and I did this. Acknowledge it. And then defuse. It's called defusing, which is day 2 work. Defuse, let go, be flexible, and rise up into that place called heaven. That's where we want to be, isn't it, Sean? We want to be in heaven. We don't want to be so grounded on the earth. The good news is day 3, you get to come back to earth. It's a new earth, though. That's where he creates that, the land comes up out of the water, David. Okay, new earth, day 3. But day 2, we're learning to defuse, to let go. Our ego is no longer the boss. It's no longer in charge. Okay. So moving along here, this is Secrets of Heaven 5096. Indeed, once they subscribe to falsity, they no longer have any freedom to choose or receive what is true. And those who are subscribing heavily, I like that word heavily, subscribing heavily to that falsity, do not have any freedom even to see it, let alone acknowledge and believe it. You see why step 1 in a lot of these therapeutic processes of rigid thinking is accept, acknowledge, let the light in. That's the first step. And he goes on to say, their convictions are so powerful inside them that it removes all freedom to think anything different, and so strong that it holds their actual thoughts in bond, in prison, so to speak. Wow. Now I'm saying this because we're about to look at flexibility, and I really wanted to push for you what this virtue is. Who thinks flexibility is a beautiful virtue? Isn't it? When you look at rigidity, rigid thinking and the mental suffering it causes us, the mental pain. Being a flexible person, I would not think just off the top of my head that being a flexible person is necessarily a spiritual quality. Would you? I wouldn't. But when you look at what falsity and evil does to our heart, you realise that being flexible is very important. Think of the little lambs that follow the shepherd, as opposed to the goat that says, bah, grass is greener on that rock, see you later. Isn't it? Flexibility. Let's begin. Okay, I'll read the front, and then, I'll get you to read inside. On the front of the order of service, this virtue allows us I just want to get off this screen. This virtue allows us to adjust and adapt to a changing environment. My environment's always changing. One of the beautiful things about heaven is it's always changing too. But in the best, of course. It's always upgrading. Isn't that a nice thought? Heaven's always upgrading. So it's changing. We've got to be flexible there too. This virtue allows us to adjust and adapt to a changing environment. Flexibility causes us to thrive, discovering opportunities where rigidity causes us to miss those moments. I think it was back in 2017 they did a scientific experiment to see if you can become more lucky. Now, I don't believe in luck, but they found you can become more lucky. But what it really was, when you have a positive mindset, your mind becomes more flexible and you see opportunities right in front of you. When you have a more negative mindset, the evidence is there and you miss it. So they found actually people who were more positive saw opportunities and did better in life. We discover solutions when others are only seeing problems. One of my favourite sayings, that's a nice problem to have. You know, when someone says something, that's a nice problem to have. Imagine someone saying to you, oh, our church is growing so big we haven't got enough seats. That's a nice problem to have, isn't it? There are nice problems, and it's how you look at things. It's this perspective. Reframe it. Day 2 work is about reframing things. Your ego's going to give you the down. The light of heaven gives you the positive. Reframe it. So when we have a flexible nature, we are open to other people, to their thoughts, their ideas and their views. That's because we're not afraid, too, of them harming us with those ideas. We do not always need to be right or have everything our own way. Life changes are easier to accept, and difficult circumstances are less likely to wear us down or break down our drive to move ahead, improve our lives, and live all the lives of those around us. Flexibility, nice virtue. All virtues come from God. We're getting a closer look at God's face when we look at this virtue. Okay, would you just think here about people who've stayed flexible in your life even though things are constantly up and down. Would you read Taming Your Life?
Give some thought for the people who have been faithful in your life. Consider how they have stood by you through the good times and the tough times. How might your life be different without them?
And how might their lives be different without us being flexible too? That idea of people need us to be able to be flexible through their ups and their downs. How about definitions? Would you read through the definitions?
Definition, the ability to change or be changed easily according to the situation. The ability to bend or to be bent easily without breaking.
Now, when I pull this straight off the web, somewhere like Webster or something like that, and when I do, and I drop it in there, I begin to think about spiritual applications, and my thoughts immediately jumped down to the first of the scriptural quotes. Isaiah 42, verse 3. A bruised reed he shall not break. The smoking flax shall not be quenched. He shall bring forth judgment unto truth. A beautiful promise in Isaiah there. We're going to look at what that means on the back of the order of service, so we'll leave it to then. But there is a beautiful, deep spiritual meaning here. The Lord is incredibly flexible with our evils and our desires. And again, Jordan and I were talking about this on the way in, weren't we? How so much of what we do is selfish. But if we didn't have that, we'd have no runway, nothing to take off from, isn't it? The Lord allows that because he's looking at what it's going to become, not what it is. So now, would you read some synonyms?
Synonyms: elasticity, pliability, springiness, pliancy, tensility, give.
Give. What do we think of that? You got a favourite one there? What's your favourite one? You smiled there at one moment, chuckled there at one moment, Gabe. What was the one you...
That was at springiness.
Yeah, me too, springiness.
But pliancy is a nice one.
Does that mean Tigger is very flexible? Winnie the Pooh is springing around everywhere. Very, very flexible. Another one, someone else who just jump out and tell me your favourite one there that stood out at you, that hit you. Jordan, anything?
Give, I think, strikes me.
Give. Sorry?
I wouldn't have thought give.
You wouldn't have thought give? No. What is it? Why give? How could give be flexibility?
Just being able to see the opportunities to give in, maybe.
Give in? Yeah, that's not bad. What about horse and carriage? And then, we develop these cars and we have these... Who knows what, springs are under a car? They're big, long, solid pieces of metal in a circular shape, plated together, that give. Aren't cars much more comfortable to ride in than horse and carriage? Unless the horse and carriage has got some nice modern springs on it too. That's probably what comes up for me when I think of give.
Or wood.
What about help?
Help's beautiful.
Give help.
Give help. Yeah.
What I try and do every day.
Yes. If you've got a different opinion to me and I back off, I think I'm helping you. Like if I'm being too...
You're giving.
You're giving.
In doing that.
Yeah. I'm giving.
Giving way.
Giving way. But I still say positive doubt's good. Are you so sure about that? I'm not so sure about that. I've just got questions. Just leave it at that. You don't come across rigid. And do that to your own mind as well. When it's yelling at you, just say, I'm not so sure about that. Yeah. So, now I had a quick look over this last night again, and I realised that when I grabbed this off the net, I don't know that, even the web has mistakes on it. I think these antonyms are more synonyms. complacent. To be complacent does sound like the opposite of flexible, but accommodation to me sounds like flexibility. Give and take sounds like flexibility, and amendability. So I think there's a bit of an error there. So would you help me out here with just throwing out your own antonyms, your own opposites of flexibility? Can I just have a couple of opposites of flexibility? Yes, Jordan?
Obstinance.
Obstinance. Oh, isn't that a nice punchy word? Obstinance.
Rigidity.
Sorry?
Rigidity.
That's my favourite, David. Rigidity, isn't it? Being rigid. Rigid. Sorry? Opinionated. Opinions are like armpits. Everyone has them and they usually stink. That's true, yeah. Opinionated. Sorry? I do. I speak for myself. I do. I apologise. You know. Yes. Any others? What say Sean or Sarah? Something. What's the opposite of rigid? What's a nice Chinese word for the opposite of rigid? Sorry.
Gentle.
Flexible.
Flexible.
Yeah, the opposite of flexible. Opposite of gentle.
Opposite gentle is
Stiff.
Hard.
Arrogant. Arrogant. Oh, that's brutal. Arrogant. Isn't that a brutal word? No one likes that word. Whoever says, "Oh, you're an arrogant person," they feel good. No, not many people do, is it? Any others, Bev? Does anything jump up for you? I like
inflexible.
inflexible.
Stubborn.
Ooh, good one, Guan. Stubborn. You mule, you.
Stoic.
What about snobbish?
Snobbish. There's that rigidity in there, isn't it? Definitely. What was that one?
Stoic.
Stoic. That's interesting. Stoic. I mean, I like to think of stoic as positive, but it has a negative, doesn't it? Being stoic. Yeah, because you're stuck, aren't you, in some ways? Yeah.
One-sided.
Oh, that's beautiful. One-sided. Yeah. Sorry? Unreasonable. That's the best one today yet. That really is. Because, we're talking about therapy. It's called rational therapy or reasonable therapy. When you're stuck in your thoughts and feelings, whatever they are, isn't any room for reason. These people who have those breastplates on are unreasonable. You cannot reason with them. Wow. Sounds like social politics today, doesn't it? Sounds like a lot of the ideology that's coming up today. Very unreasonable. Goodness me. Yeah. And you know what's fascinating? Swinburne says that it's a love of self which leads to hate of others. And you think about what's caused more death. Are you ready for this? What's caused more death in the 20th and 21st century than anything?
Hatred of others.
Governments. Governments. I'm not picking, all governments. Hatred of others, you're right. Think about it. When you have a government that becomes too rigid, it ends up in the death of its citizens. It does. It could be that they throw them into a war. Or it could be that, this happens. It's human beings not being flexible, not allowing there to be, you to be you and me to be me. I'm all for people being who they want to be, but if they want to be something weird or strange, I'm all fine with that. The world's more wonderful. But when they say I have to be weird like them too, no, that's you've gone too far.
As you said weeks ago, having dominion over others.
That's
And it's a huge cause of concern.
It's a huge cause of concern. That's why we elect them. That's why we cycle them. Everything has a use by date. Does it not? Yes. Okay, if I'm not here next week, you know why. Okay, come and visit me. That's okay. All right, so rigidity. Let's stick with rigidity and unreasonable. They're my two favourites today. Moving on, have a look at these quotes. Brian Tracy. He's a bit of a hero for me in the sales department. He's crossed many generations right into the whole new. He's quite an amazing guy in sales, and he says, "Be clear about your goals, but be flexible about the process of achieving them." Isn't that good? So that helps me because I don't think of flexibility as spiritual. I think if you're spiritual, you put your armour on, you've got a goal, and you're going to fight. But what he's saying here is do that, but as you proceed, be flexible about, is this working? Am I getting results? Do I need to stop and draw back and think about this again, isn't it? Yeah. You know where that's needed the most? Relationships, marriages, husbands, wives, children. We need to step back and go, is this working? And be flexible with that. So, Gay, would you read the next quote for us?
Life is movement. The more life there is, the more flexibility there is. The more fluid you are, the more you are alive.
Wow.
Arnaud Desjardins.
Yeah, I don't know how I got you to say that one because I don't know how to pronounce that name either. What is that saying? Isn't that incredible? Life is fluid. You know, with the devastation of cyclone, help me here, cyclone up north. Tracy, thank you. You know, and they started to build more stronger buildings in the building code, level 5, 5 and 6. The key to a stronger building is a more flexible building.
Yeah.
Think of the tree that stands so rigid and tall and the storm comes and crack. The other that learns to bow in the wind. Okay, after the wind, it's maybe not great, but it'll find its way back up again to radiate for another day. Isn't that idea? I need to be a little bit flexible, and we're getting there. We'll get to this quote about a bruised reed the Lord will not break. It's beautiful. The next one there, Gay?
I like this one. Blessed are the hearts that can bend, they shall never be broken.
Oh, how beautiful. I even like the play on the rhetoric of playing on scripture there, isn't it? Blessed are the hearts that bend. They'll never be broken.
And flexibility is the key to stability.
Flexibility is the key to stability. John Wooden. That's what I was saying with the buildings, isn't it? You know, when you learn to build a building that can flex with an earthquake or with a storm, it survives longer. An amazing thought. Flexibility is stability.
Can I quote some Chinese philosophy?
Yes, please. Yes.
They said,
when you they said, when you're 30 years old, you need standing up as a man. When you're 40 years old, you need to clear that miserable.
Okay.
When you're 50 years old, you need to understand the calling of God.
Wow.
When you're 60 years old, then you need to harmonize with your ear.
Harmonise with your...
Yeah. Meaning when you hear anything, you're being very flexible,
Wonderful.
very harmonized to hear anything almost.
That's beautiful.
I mean, beautiful.
Did they go on to
philosophy.
70 and 80 or they just leave it there?
Oh, yeah, well, it's a
70.
Yeah, and 70 years old,
Yes.
it's a very古来稀70古来稀 very
Rare.
rare
Mature? Did you say the word
mature.
Mature, because you are so mature, you will not do anything wrong.
So what you're saying, it's like a good bottle of wine. You know, they don't last that long. They're usually drunk before they get to that kind of age. Thank you. That was really good. So we get back to this quote here: "A bruised reed he shall not break, and a smoking flax he shall not quench." Jump to the back. Let's go there now and see what Swedenborg says about this. It is such a beautiful revelation here. Isaiah, you know, it's one of these cryptic statements that the prophets made. And Christianity were going, well, what did he mean, a bruised reed, you know, in the wilderness? And here's what he says: "A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoking flax he will not quench, and he will bring forth into judgment, truth into judgment. This treats of the Lord, and a bruised reed he will not break signifies that he will not hurt sensual divine truth." Well, what is sensual divine truth? What would you say, Ian? Sensual divine truth?
Natural.
There's only one God.
Oh, okay, there's only one God, yes, yes.
For the reason that I translated the paper, the first question is, if you ask a Christian, what is the core of the Bible?
Yes?
The answer is there's only one God.
There's only one God. I like that. Yeah. So divine truth is so amazingly beyond us, we can never truly grasp it. We're always approaching. It's called apparent truths. Now, when that divine truth has descended from heaven through the Lord into the Holy Spirit into your heart, you're left with sensual divine truth. Is that how you would say it, Ian? The best that you can see, feel, touch, taste and understand, right? But the Lord's there to lift that sensual up into higher cognitive thinking. So the Lord won't hurt sensual divine truth with the simple and with children. A smoking flax he will not quench. This signifies that he will not destroy the divine truth that is beginning to live from a very little good of love with the simple and with children. Flax signifies truth. Smoking signifies there being alive. Some little love, some little flame. And because both, that is the reed and the flax, signify truth, it is said that the Lord will bring forth truth into judgment, which means he will bring forth them with intelligence. So then look at Secrets of Heaven. It goes a little bit more clearer and it says, a crushed reed he does not break. Who's ever felt like a crushed reed? I have. Haven't you? No longer, no longer feeling brave and strong, just kind of crushed by life. A crushed reed he does not break, a smouldering flax he does not quench. He propels judgment towards truth. In other words, the Lord does not break our illusions. Wow. The Lord does not break our illusions or extinguish our cravings. Fascinating. Instead, he bends them towards truth and goodness. And that's exactly what we were saying earlier, how Jordan and I were talking on the way here. All the Lord has to work with is our selfish desires. But it is the runway. It's the runway which he can launch us up into that place called
Heaven.
heaven.
There's something interesting there, that smoking signifies it being alive from some little love. When we were up on that cruise from Darwin to Broome, we were in a very remote part of the coastline, and we had a welcoming ceremony by the local Aboriginals who tend that land, and that was just smoke coming up.
They did a smoking ceremony?
Yes,
Oh, how
just
beautiful.
as we walked around the stones that were,
They did smoke.
and they just wafted the smoke into us.
Beautiful.
And this would be the origin of it.
Wow. It would be.
A little bit of
It
love.
would be. Those ancient practices come back to some
A little bit of
correspondence.
welcome and love.
That's beautiful. Wow. That's fascinating. Okay, so let's go back to the quotes again. Have a look at Matthew. Do you want to read that out nice and loud for us, Gay? Matthew 12.
At that time, Jesus went on the Sabbath day through the corn, and his disciples were hungered, and began to pluck the ears of corn and to eat. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said unto him, Behold, thy disciples do that which is not lawful to do upon the Sabbath day.
Okay, just pause for a sec, Gay. What's going on there? Who's doing what? Who's doing what here in this story? The Pharisees are being very rigid with the law, aren't they? Too bad that they're hungry. Too bad that they're hungry. It's the Sabbath, you can't pick corn and eat it. Well, God's more concerned about our hunger than the rules. But the Pharisees are more concerned about the rules than the fact that a person hungered. And no wonder so many people are struggling to come into some churches today. They're hungry, but the rules is all about the rules instead of the person. So keep going, Gay.
But he said unto them, Have ye not read what David did when he was hungry, and they that were with him? How he entered into the house of God, and did eat the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat, neither for them which were with him, but only for the priests.
That's fascinating. David was a king and a warrior, and had blood on his hands. Certainly from a Levitical point of view, should not have gone into that Holy of Holies. In fact, if he had, under some circumstances, he would have died. King David watched Uzziah. Ian, I forgot. Sorry? Uzzah carrying the ark, and it was going to fall off because they were carrying it wrong. If they'd done it according to biblical standard, it wouldn't have fallen. And Uzzah reached up and stopped it from falling and dropped dead. The power inside the Ark of the Covenant. There's another time when David was so struggling between him and God. He's like, God, I want to break through. I need you. He went into the temple and grabbed a hold of that thing he shouldn't have, and it didn't kill him. And that's why he had the confidence and the boldness here. But you've got to understand, David here represents the Word of God. It represents the Lord. That's why it didn't kill him. The Word allows us to touch that which normally should kill us. Think about that. I'm not saying God wants to kill us. I'm just saying that light and the heat of God is so powerful that it would consume us. But the Word allows us to reach in and touch that which is not lawful normally to be touched. And so but here there's this rigidity about the rules that are there to protect you until they're not needed anymore. And it says in Hebrews, behold, we have an open way into the temple. Doesn't it? We have an open way. Okay, so 1 Corinthians.
To the weak became I as weak, that I might gain the weak. I am made all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. And this I do for the gospel's sake, that I might be partaker thereof with you.
Well, that's a supreme example of flexibility, isn't it? You know, Paul was willing to be all things to all people. When he was in one Greek town, and he read a plaque that said, "To the unknown God," he just simply sprang-board off that and started a period of sharing with people and saying, "Let me talk to you about the unknown God." He didn't say, "You're bad, you're wrong." He just springboarded right off that and began to talk to them. Mars Hill, that's what it was. He was, and this is this idea that when we're flexible, we're wanting to be whatever that person needs to get them to a better place. So Galatians 1:10.
For do I now persuade men or God? Or do I seek to please men? For if I yet pleased men, I should not be the servant of Christ.
Yeah, I like that verse because it's the opposite now. We can become so rigid in our trying to please each other that we're not following our heart conviction, isn't it? You can't, you know, what's that saying? You can please everybody some of the time, but you're not going to please everybody all the time. Or you can please someone all the time is the other saying, but you'll not be able to please everyone. It's that, so who is the someone that I want to please? Well, I want to follow my heart and my conviction. So sometimes I've just got to go, look, that's your choice. I let you go. I'm not rejecting you. I'm just going to go with my conviction. And that's a part of being flexible too. When everything in you is pulling at you because they're friends or their family. Yeah. And Philippians?
Not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. I know both how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I'm instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. Notwithstanding ye have well done that you did communicate with my affliction.
Beautiful. Let's just pray to say, Lord, help me be content with my current processes. Let me be at peace with my future goals, knowing that you see and hear all things, and you will bring me on that path. Amen. Yeah, it's very powerful, isn't it? You know, when you hear about prosperity messages in the church, and I'm all for prosperity because heaven is not full of poverty. But again, you can take the prosperity message so far that God might call you into a situation where you may not be prospering as such, and you have to be willing to go with that process because you might just need that for your regeneration, isn't it? And you're saying, but God, you promised prosperity, and you're fighting with the Lord, and he's saying, but just go this path for a time because there's something I need you to learn, to teach, and to grow in. I need you to let go of something, be flexible. Colossians 3:23, and I love this, it's one of my favourites. And whatsoever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not unto men. Now that's a hard one, but sometimes you've got to, when someone hurts you because of an expectation, you've just got to pull back and go, okay, I'm doing this because of the Lord. And even though they've hurt me, and now I want to act differently because they hurt me, I'm not going to act differently. People will let me down, and I will let people down. That will happen, and it's okay. But the Lord will never let me down. That's the truth of it. Gay, Romans 8.
Likewise, the Spirit also helps our infirmities, for we know not what we should pray for as we ought, but the Spirit itself makes intercession for us with groanings which cannot be uttered.
Okay, Gay. Who's felt that at times? You felt inside you there's just something you need to pray about with God. It just won't go away, this almost like an anxiety. And you just don't know how to put it into words, because that's what he's talking about here. It's God in you birthing something, but it doesn't come through into the natural, rational parts of our mind yet. But keep reading.
And he that searches the hearts knows what is the mind of the Spirit, because he makes intercession for the saints according to the will of God. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose.
And that's the key. That's the great exchange. I like to call it the great exchange. You know, Jesus said, come to me, all you heavy burdened. He wants to exchange. I'll take your burdens and you can have my peace. Well, that's a pretty good deal if we can remember to do that. Well, how do I do that? I just can't give. I'm stuck. I can't give this burden to you, God. Have a look at it again. Say this inside yourself. All things are working toward, all things work together for good. It's not that all things are good. Some situations are bad, but the Lord's still working it towards an ultimate good, isn't he? He's bringing it towards an ultimate good. All things work together for an ultimate good for them that love God, to them that are the called according to his purpose. And we know what the called ones are, don't we? The church, the called ones. We talked about that 2 weeks ago, the called ones. So if you're with the church, if you're called, have peace. Okay, in this, give the Lord your burden and say, Lord, you've promised that you will work this out. That's the great exchange. And you know that what's fascinating is that neurological science has proven that this is a phenomenon. They have a term for it, some sort of cognitive... Look, you don't even... If you believe in a higher power or a universe, they've watched the brain, and when the person gives it over to some higher power, all the chemistry changes in the brain, the stress and anxiety goes out, and the higher cognitive brain kicks in and they start problem solving in a beautiful way. Isn't that fascinating? And they have a special term for it which sounds a bit like exchange. You exchange. It has some word. I love it. I've got to memorise it. So I call it the great exchange, because the Lord's saying, come to me with your burdens. I'm humble and meek and light, and I will give you rest for your souls. Beautiful stuff. So there's a real key for you today. When you're struggling and you're in a rigid state, you can't get over an anxious moment or a fearful moment, or maybe it's what's going on right now with the pandemic. Give it to the Lord and know that there is some higher purpose in it. So let's go to the card before we read the meditation together, and then I'll close the word. Flexibility. Take this home with you. The power to adjust and meet the needs of the circumstance. Isn't that nice? Adjust and meet the needs of whatever is presenting itself to you. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect, the will of God. Romans 12:2. And Secrets of Heaven 7068. Those motivated by good are, so to speak, flexible. Isn't that nice? Motivated by good, they're flexible. And when they humble themselves before the divine, they bow right down to the ground. There you go, Sean. It's that culture in your ancients, bowing down to the ground. It's in the card. Oh, you got the card? Yeah. So people bowing right down before the Lord is an act of saying, I trust you. I'm flexible with your plan for me, God. He says that they bow right down to the ground, for truth without good is utterly what? Rigid. Here's another way of saying it. Truth without good is Satan. What? I'll say it again. Truth without good is Satan. Makes you think, doesn't it? It says in the epistles, speaking the truth in love, we will grow up into Christ. Into, literally Christ. We'll grow up and become the sons and daughters of God. Speaking the truth in love. You take that love out, Pharisees, rules, regulations. But look what he goes on to say. So truth without good is rigid. Good, on the other hand, is in itself flexible. And when it has truth introduced into it, that truth too, because it develops into good there, becomes flexible. Isn't that beautiful? That's just so powerful. You know, we have the truth, don't we? And if it really has us, you'll see it because we learn to be flexible with it. An open mind, like a parachute. Okay, so there we have it. That's our study today, our look at the virtue of flexibility. Let's say this meditation together, and then I will close the word. Together, I trust the divine with all things towards my spiritual advantage. I am open to change and I adapt easily to new environments. I view problems as solutions waiting to present themselves. I keep my mind open to the Lord and His guidance. I am thankful, Lord, for your gift of flexibility. It opens my life to continual new possibilities. I'll pray. Thank you. It takes a village, doesn't it? Dear Lord, we lift this up to you, a small but very precious offering that represents our lives. We want to live for you. We want to shine for you. We want people to know your love, even as we are knowing it. Let it be acceptable in your eyes. Amen. So you want to help me sing a new commandment and we'll close the word? A new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you love one another as I have loved you. One to another by the you are my disciples if you have love one to another. The Lord bless you. The Lord keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you. And the Lord give you his everlasting peace. So I encourage you to socialise while distancing. Say a little hello and go around and say hi.